I just put paper
That's
towels in there.
okay.
So.
You just put paper towels in? Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Not with wet hands and shake out your hands.
Absolutely. Thank you. You bet. No, please do. Hey, you can take all my calls. You can take all the calls. And enter data while you're there. Let's leave the door open. Yeah, it'll get a little close in here.
I was in a really nice neighborhood.
Everybody.
In East Wenatchee.
Ooh.
And
The power was off at Schrier, the light, the weather light, and it was so dangerous when we first got back from
everybody
They called the city, and they go, oh yeah, we're out
So which neighborhood?
okay, well, get all that stuff. And then we went to this apartment complex that had a long gate, and their power was off, and you couldn't.
Yeah, I said,
They had to have the manager
it's off Fort,
no stuff happens.
going towards the airport. And it's a new neighborhood. Parts of it are older, but most of it's younger. And
It's a good way of looking at it.
Doctor, how are you?
Glad you're here. Join us. Actually, first you gotta have food. You can if you care to. Good to see you.
I told her you just go in here, huh?
Yeah. Fourth South.
Well, so you're
So you're going to
Great
airport,
Road.
it's on.
Great Road. Yeah, you turn down towards the river.
Yeah, okay, southeast.
And it's some of the streets are James, Jarvis.
I live on Candace, so it's close to north.
Anyway, it's most of us on the new. It's a really nice neighborhood, and there's a little traffic there, and kids playing in the streets. Hey, pretty good.
I don't know what.
Tell you the good news. I went into a neighborhood that I don't know if it's something but all those people there was one Republican. All the rest didn't drive. It was a really successful
That's fantastic.
canvas.
So you just concerns or questions come up, or they were just already on?
Most people were just strong. Healthcare comes up a little bit.
Okay, so you just
for most people.
Yeah.
Some of them know about the ads already. What a job they are. Oh, somebody gave me a tip for you refuting it.
So, since you have a good
And you said something, I guess, like, it's untrue?
Yep.
Okay, so what this lady suggested is, since I worked at Virginia Mason,
so you know I'm having this
that clears up all that stuff about you having your own shop and weeding out the people who can't pay.
No, so I have them every Saturday or Sunday until the election.
Yeah, anyway, that might be more powerful, because then they'll
Tough one, you know,
Would you
like,
like to
ethically, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. On the other hand, if I could do it, speak up, then
yeah, well, I don't see that as a negative. Just saying you work with Virginia Mason. That means that all the other stuff that he says are untrue, because you work for me out there. You're an employee.
So about 13, 14, 16 all day.
Yeah, because
Thank you, that's great news. How are you?
Good.
Long time no see. I just had dinner.
I missed the dinner.
I'd rather take my little car. I charged it 170 miles on it. I figured that would cover it. I love being here.
So I'm gonna go.
You've heard my spiel.
No, I'm over there. So behind you.
I'm probably ticking you off, huh?
I'm from Minnesota, you know, we were born with blue blood. Not so much anymore, but, you know, my first election was 64. Yeah. No, I wasn't.
No, that would have been 60.
The next one?
Yep.
Johnson, there you go. Yeah.
I didn't get to,
I did vote for him. I was so shocked when he was through.
I'm Mark. I'll show you how far I got.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking care of my animals all those years.
Yeah, I think I'm signed up for next week too. Hello, how you doing? Yeah, can't do that.
Are you?
It's okay, sit closer. Or?
She says they are.
So I might find someone on my way to town. Yes. Yes. I lived briefly in Ashland, Oregon. Okay. Which was the meat care capital of everywhere. And so when I would fly to see David, my husband, it's a clock. I would come up with a
Oh, nice.
because I know we just couldn't get enough. We ate that with no time. We cook them, we do everything we possibly could.
Sour cream
I've
pear
never heard
pie?
anything of sour cream.
We do.
I'm going for that.
Put a packet of pie. Try it, maybe.
Something
You
else
as
new
a
is
doctor,
there.
shame on you.
Doctor here drinks cold milk latte, so yeah. Haven't killed me yet.
Well, we were out canvassing for you.
Thank you so much.
Good response. Good responses. Yeah. And we didn't have to hand out any information. We said, yeah, of course.
They already knew.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've saturated this area in the mail. A lot of people said, I've gotten 3 of those in the mail.
I feel bad for the trees that are coming down because of that, but ultimately it will be, you know,
It'll
a
work.
better vote for the environment to have me in.
Thank you.
So, yeah, well, good. That's good news. Any questions? Any concerns out there? Questions asking about any of the attack ads?
There's a lot of
One of my biggest concerns is education,
Yes.
or lack of. It's, you know, it seems like our whole system is against educating our young people. And if they get out of higher education, they're burdened with such crippling debt for years and years. And it's like, I mean, you look at some of the interviews of Trump supporters on YouTube, and you can see why people, or conservative politicians, vote down education.
It's really interesting that somehow being educated has become an elite thing, and it really should be in everybody. Like I think we all want every child in this country to have their best shot at the American dream, and that means starting early. And make sure the kids get to kindergarten, and this is what the pediatrician brings, right, is making sure that by the time kids get to kindergarten, they're on even footing, because right now, and I'm starting way before college, right, right now, if you're a low socioeconomic status kiddo, you start 2 years behind, and then you never catch up, and so really making those investments early pay off all the way through school with the socio-emotional and behavioral and the academic, and then at the end, making sure that for kids who want to go to college, it doesn't bankrupt them, and making sure that kids are aware that trade schools exist and apprenticeship programs exist, and there's lots of ways to get to a good middle-class job, but certainly if what they want is college, let's make sure that it's affordable, accessible, won't bankrupt them. Yeah, I think about how hard it is to be a 21-year-old right now. Pay down that debt, save for a house.
I'm just so glad to hear you talk about this. I work with a lot of caregivers that have gone through our education system here, and they're hardworking, great nurses, nurse aides, but their grammar level is about third grade. And I have family in the education system here, and when the kids come to school, when Spanish-speaking families, they have no English skills. And so I thought, why aren't these kids in Head Start? Their parents make too much money. They work in orchards, they work hard, and they make too much money to qualify for Head Start.
Wow.
And that's the stupidest thing, because it's so expensive to try to help them get caught up, and I'm seeing that in our system, they're not getting caught up.
Right. Right. And then I think we also have to have, have it so that parents can work a single 40-hour job so that they can be home to help at night. I mean, the whole family could learn English together, learn grammar together.
Get to bed on time.
You get to bed on time and and get breakfast in the morning. The education can't happen exclusively at school. It's got to be all wraparound before school, after school, parents, the whole village. There's a doggy here today. Okay, sounds like we're at critical mass, so I'll stand up. I see new faces and faces that I know, and so I'll give you the introduction to Kim Schrier, but I really like this back and forth question and answer, and I think you'll probably get more out of this meeting if, that's really what you want to hear, if we spend more time on that and less time on me introducing myself. So, up there, I'm Kim Schrier, and I am a pediatrician and a wife and a mom in Issaquah. I've been living either in Issaquah or Sammamish for the past 17 years, taking care of thousands of children. That has been my life's work and passion, and I never saw myself in a position of running for office. I've been politically interested, fascinated, involved forever, but it was really never my hope or dream to do this. But the 2016 election was a huge wake-up call. On many levels, I really consider this administration to be a direct threat to children and to families, and really pretty much in any avenue that you're thinking right now. Somebody's calling me. So I don't know. Democracy, a threat to the planet, a threat to education, like we were talking about, a threat to a lot of things, and healthcare certainly. And the day after the 2016 election, and there had been plenty of talk going on in our house about politics, my 8-year-old son came downstairs, and I think that when I was 8 and how much I knew about politics, and it was pretty close to zero, right? But he's a pretty astute kid, and he came downstairs and he looked at my face and he looked at David's, and he just took this big breath and was like, uh-oh, does this mean we have to move to another country? Yeah. And I get a pretty familiar, oh yeah, we had that talk in our house too, from a lot of people. But of course the answer is no, but what we really need to do is all get involved. So people like me who have never been involved before need to jump in. I think a lot of women all across this country found that politics hit them very personally, and they made that same calculation at the same time, and then lo and behold, we've got this wave of women to the point where I was at an event with a gathering of candidates recently, and there were 30 candidates, 26 of them were women. Shocking, right? And we were not typical stories, right? We all came because something about it was personal to us, whether it was a parent who had an illness or a child who was in illness and then she got her hospital bills. It was those kind of stories up and down. So for me, it was personal because I had to explain to this 8-year-old child how it is that Donald Trump became our president, a person who bullies and grabs women's bodies and then threatens to sue them. And it was personal for me as a woman concerned about reproductive rights and women's health care. Personal as a person with a background in science. I studied astrophysics, I worked at the EPA, then I went to medical school, and science is not something that you choose to believe in. It's just science is science, and it's becoming a political issue where half of our representatives understand that and half claim that it is elitist, or the jury's still out, and the fact of the matter is that some of our most important issues today, like our changing climate, like the fires that we have here, like our drier climate, we need technologies for our orchardists. That all depends on science. You know, the jury's in. We need to make some really responsible decisions for future generations, but not just that. I believe evidence matters. So whether we're talking about immigration policy or tax policy, economics, we should be looking at data and facts and making informed decisions. Personal, just as a human being who sees trends going on in our country with scapegoating and with racism and xenophobia that I think should trouble us all, because those tendencies never lead to anything good, and the divisiveness, the fact that people cannot disagree but still get along, right? We should be able to still have civil conversations, and we're losing that. And then finally, all of the threats to repeal the Affordable Care Act. That one was very personal because I am a pediatrician, but I also have a pre-existing condition. I have type 1 diabetes, and so to see this Affordable Care Act that is not perfect. Of course it's not perfect. It was a first stab at a really big problem, right? But it did something really important. It gave 26 million people like me the peace of mind of having insurance coverage and knowing that they won't go bankrupt because of medical expenses. The perfect? No. Does that mean throw it out? Absolutely not. And so when that first Trump's Care bill was introduced, when, just a reminder, would have defunded Planned Parenthood, would have taken away protections for people with pre-existing conditions, would have taken away protections for people over 50, would have removed the individual mandate, and would have cut health care visits from 32,000 people in our district. I stepped up. I went with 3 other doctors to Dave Reichert's office and explained all that, hoping that he would do the right thing for the people in the district, right? You don't have to keep this promise. We'll all forgive you. And days later, he voted for it in committee. And I just felt that we deserve better. And especially right now, we deserve representatives who will stick up for our best interests. And it became a pretty simple calculation. You know, at the time Reichert was in office, and it was, my goodness, the pediatrician with type 1 diabetes, I get it. And I don't think he gets it, and so I'm going to run against him. And it came to be that simple. And I also understand that health and well-being is not just about our health care. It's about whether we have clean air to breathe and clean water to drink, whether our kids have that great public education system. It is about whether we have Social Security and Medicare, because our seniors should be able to retire with dignity, and we should never go back to a time when we have seniors living in poverty, and we are seeing that come back right now. I mean, when we are seeing housing that is less affordable, it is our elderly who are losing out and are becoming part of our homeless population. It is a crisis. And so those are the reasons that I'm running. I believe that this election, well, there are so many critical issues. I believe it's going to come down to just a few things. And one of them is here, is we're all feeling this pinch, and our prescription drug prices are out of control. And that is very much a kitchen table issue. It's also a national issue, and it's something the Democrats come in, and we are ready to come in and get to work immediately solving. And I have a health care plan that gets, oh good, yes, like on day one. And we can talk about that in question and answer if you'd like. I think the second big issue is going to be the middle class and what's going on with us losing our middle class. Because what we're seeing is a tax plan that supports the wealthiest. We're seeing a tax on unions, and we are losing the middle class. And when this gap between 10% and everybody else grows, this is becoming a national crisis. And our country does best. Our schools do best. Our people do best. Everything does best when we have a really good, thriving middle class, and we need to make efforts to bring that back. That means livable wages. It means middle class wages. It means tax cuts that go to the middle class, and it means really building an economy from the middle out. And then the last thing, I think, is just a referendum on what is going on in our country right now. The divisiveness, the misogyny, a party that will not stand up to this president, the non-believing of women, and the disregard for some really important issues. And we can talk about this whole Kavanaugh fiasco as well, but just the notion that that gets dismissed as being something that he did previously. I mean, the fact of the matter is, like, if my kid did that, I would be pissed as all heck. It doesn't matter if there's alcohol involved or not. And if you're running to be a Supreme Court justice the rest of your life, it matters. We need somebody who has a really good moral compass, and that's missing.
And a stable disposition.
And a stable disposition.
Yeah.
Yes.
And didn't lie to get his current position.
It does make you wonder when there's even a lie about why he threw up during Beach Week. Like, I think we can all understand that that was too much alcohol, but even that you can be straight about. And how do you trust that? You know, it is not at that point about ideology. Like, there will be a conservative justice confirmed. We get that. Just that this particular one really does not deserve the post. So those are the reasons I'm running. What a pediatrician brings in a good part is this longer view on what it really means for the next generation. So we talked about how we give every child a really fair start and get them started at kindergarten on time, which means really starts back with planning pregnancies and supporting with prenatal care and making sure that there's good quality daycare and child care. It means funding our public education system and fighting any attempts to have vouchers and take away to put it in private systems. And it means looking forward to make sure that post-college or post-high school education is affordable. But I think it also means thinking, you know, not just to the 2 years away to the next election, but to the next generation and taking care of our planet. Because I really do believe that in 20 years or 50 years there will be a whole generation or generations that look back at us and think, what the heck were they thinking, you know? When they could have done something in the 2000s and the 2010s when we had not quite hit that tipping point where there was no return, why didn't they step up and listen to science and make some changes? And why did they continue to just pull every bit of coal and oil out of this earth and change our climate? And so these are the reasons I'm running. I'm super excited to do this. And this race has shaped up to be a very competitive one. This is a district that Dave Reichert won by 20 points. And the New York Times just did a poll that has me up a point. And I am really excited about that because this is a competitive race. It is our best chance to flip a seat here in the state of Washington and do our part to take back the House and put some real checks and balances on a chaotic and corrupt administration. And included in all that corruption, by the way, and chaos, I would put it in the chaos, not the corruption. Included in that chaos is this tariff war that is absolutely killing our farmers and that now everyone in the state is feeling because every product that gets exported from our state gets hit with a 5 to 25% tariff. And that is irresponsible and it is alienating our allies in the world. So we can do so much better, and that's why I'm running. It's a super tight competitive race, and this could come down to, I mean, remember the Gregoire race came down to 133 votes. It is going to be so squeaky tight. I am encouraged by my 1-point lead because there's still 25 to 30% of people who don't even know who I am, and they don't know, they're undecided about me, which means that I have room to grow, but everybody knows who Dino Rossi is, and I don't think he has room to grow. He's attacking left and right. Of course, all of that is untrue, just to set the record straight, but none of it is a surprise, and so it's just really important that I get my message out, and that's where all of you come in, so thank you for doorbelling this morning, because having those one-on-one conversations is the best way to say, I met her, I know her, I talked with her, here's what she stands for, and to dispel rumors, to answer those questions at the doors. So thank you. Every door counts. I will take your questions.
Kim, we had a lot of great conversations with your future constituents today, and a couple of them I don't know you very well, and I didn't know I inferred from the comments that I thought you were inexperienced, right? And whatever that comes from,
sure.
Good or bad, I want to be armed better next time I have a conversation to think about how your experience translates into the role that you want to take on.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So there's a lot of ways. First of all, some of this depends on how you see our House of Representatives. The question was about experience. And I think that our House of Representatives should really be representatives. So
you work here.
People from our communities who live and work in our communities, send their children to public schools in our communities, and that we should all bring some gifts. Right? And so there are a lot of people with a ton of legislative experience, which is what Dino Rossi would bring. Not necessarily good, very partisan, And we have a whole House of Representatives that is not really accomplishing what we need accomplished. And so this is where my experience as a pediatrician comes in handy. It comes in handy because I know a lot about this healthcare system and how to fix it and bring down costs and take on drug companies right from day one. It brings in the ability to work with people and be a really good listener and find common ground, because there's no way all my patients have been Democrats, but they, many of them who have never been involved in politics and maybe weren't even Democrats are doorbelling for me, because they know where my heart is and they know that I will be thoughtful in my answers. There's a third, this is a little bit of a funny one, which is I think temperament matters. I mean, we saw it with Kavanaugh yesterday, and I have a pretty cool, calm, collected temperament, and I think that does come from being a pediatrician, because you can't freak out, you know, like we are handed a blue, floppy, non-breathing baby, and if you freak out, that baby dies. And I would not underestimate the notion that if you can keep cool, calm, steady hand, get the tube in, bring the baby back, that could serve us well in Congress. To be kind of like level-headed and cool under pressure. So,
That's great.
does that sound all right to you?
Sounds great.
Right.
It seems to me like inexperience is a plus in the current political climate too.
I would call it a different experience, right? We could use some fresh perspectives, and that's what I bring. Yeah. You had a question.
Yeah. Going back to your comment about the middle class, I've been teaching ESL for about 4 decades, and you know, it's embedded in my brain when President Obama announced that the DACA bill, and I happened to be teaching a group of 5th graders at the time, Dr. Schrier, and they cried because it meant we can go to college, we can have this dream, we can be part of the American middle class, upper class, we're in it. Now these kids, their dreams are dashed. These kids that signed up for it feel like they have a target on their back.
And they do.
They absolutely do.
And they have an hourglass, right? I mean, right now this is only held up by the justice system. That there was a March 5th expiration, it's only been held up because the courts got involved. So the question for the people in the back was about DACA. And I mean, the fact of the matter is that 87% of the population wants a clean DACA bill. And it is abhorrent to me that they were used as leverage in budget negotiations. You know, it came down to what, CHIP or DACA, you choose. And that's just a false choice, right? I want both. Having a Democratic majority in Congress means we get a clean DACA bill. Because when you have 87% of the population that wants a clean DACA bill, all you need is to bring it to the floor, and it should get the vote, because constituents will put pressure on the Republicans to do it. So I completely agree with you. And those kids and young adults are no less American than I am. There's nowhere to deport them to. This is their country. Yeah. More questions?
This may have been a question you were asked earlier or before, so sorry for the repetition, but what, you know, I grew up in Ellensburg, which is obviously a pretty conservative, a lot of Geno-happy area, but I think it's so cool that a progressive such as yourself is running for Congress. But what would you recommend that we say to our, you know, our more conservative-leaning acquaintances and neighbors who, you know, don't see the importance of a Democratic majority in Congress, who, you know, might be an independent or even a Democrat and voted for Donald Trump and maybe still supportive of a lot of what he says? What would you recommend, or what are things that you have found to be useful to say to people in this district who might lean more conservative or Trump supporting, to why, you know, it's really important that they vote for Dr. Schrier?
Right. You know, I think it usually starts with questions, right? Like what matters to you?
Yeah.
And then whatever it is, you can at least convey where I'm coming from. I think that the notion of checks and balances matters a lot, and I believe a lot of people who are Republicans, who are moderate, who voted for Trump are really troubled by some of the things going on in our country right now, whether that's tariff wars or immigration or tax bill, where 83% of the benefit went to the wealthiest. Like, that is just not serving the people. So I guess that would be my question is, like, what about this administration do you love, and what do you think maybe could use a check and a balance, and see what's on their mind? I mean, I'm going to be a representative for everybody in this district, whether they voted for me or not. So I asked that question because I just want to know. I want to know how I can be the best representative, vote for me or not.
So, as far as single payer goes versus your plan, which I love your plan, but I'm more of a single payer person from personal experience. I have to drive 3 hours round trip to Virginia Mason for what my healthcare needs, and you know, it's been ridiculous. Ever since I moved from Western Washington to Ronald 5.5 years ago, healthcare has been a serious challenge. I've had to drive many miles to get healthcare.
Yeah.
And so what I love about the single payer system is that the biggest problem with me getting the healthcare I need is our insurance companies, and the fact that there's just no coverage and hardly any insurance available for me.
Wow. That's
So
really interesting.
it's a lot of driving, it's frustrating, and the kind of healthcare I need is just not available.
So it's not even an absence of specialists in rural areas. It's not even that. It is purely an insurance issue. Okay.
It's an absence of specialists as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's both.
So my healthcare policy, I'll hit some highlights because you know it, but not everybody does. So first is just stabilizing the ACA, so we keep all the protections for people with pre-existing conditions, bring back the subsidies, stabilize prices. The second is that it offers up Medicare as a public option. So anybody who wants it can buy into it on a sliding scale, and with subsidies available for people who can't. So it essentially creates Medicare as something that you can buy into, and Medicare is accepted by everybody. So that would solve your particular conundrum, or wouldn't solve your conundrum. Okay.
Medicare for my health issues is not hardly available. It's hardly any.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a complicated issue. That's why it's so important to me.
Yeah, and maybe we'll talk afterwards. By bringing Medicare in as a public option, it gives competition to private insurance companies to be more efficient to bring down costs. So overall, it brings down costs. Goes on to take on the cost of everything, but particularly prescription drugs, because we are held hostage to an industry that has, in the largest companies, 19% profits year over year, which is insane, especially when hospitals are having trouble even having a 1% margin to keep afloat. And most of their biggest costs are prescription drugs. So I have a whole plan on how to bring those costs down. But there's also a lot in there about rural medicine. Having specialists, incentivizing people to practice in rural areas, having more residency programs in rural areas, because when people train here, they stay here. When people train in Kittitas, they stay in Kittitas. And, you know, the appeal of living in a rural area is incredible. And so making sure that we, communities thrive when there's a hospital there, when there's specialists there. So incentivizing specialists and having telemedicine and investing in rural residency programs so that you have just as good health care wherever you live in the country. And we can talk more maybe in detail afterwards. Okay. Yes.
I had a question on what you were referring to. What are your thoughts on importing cheaper drugs from Canada?
My preference would be to just not have to pay any more in this country than in Canada by allowing Medicare to negotiate drug costs, because I don't see why we should be subsidizing the rest of the world's medicines. It is legal to bring back a year's supply from Canada. So, for any of you who want to get a prescription from your doctor, you can take it to Canada and bring back a year's worth. But that only works if you live in Canada. So we should be able to negotiate those same prices here.
When my husband had lung cancer, I called Canadian Pharmacy, faxed my prescription up there, and it was sent to us. I don't know if you can still do that to the same degree. It was interesting because it was 1/3 the cost of what I paid here.
I'll bet it was.
And then the very week that they passed the agreement that we would import Canadian beef, the savings decreased quite a bit. I think somebody made a deal. But I think it's still cheaper, although I don't know if it's as seamless as it was then. I had 3 or 4 pharmacies that I could order from.
Oh, that's interesting. Thank you for that.
And when we did treatment in Argentina, I bought a $9 prescription for an antibiotic that would have been $90 here. And they said, I said, that'd be $90 in the United States, and the doctor said nobody would buy it if you charge $9 for it. Same drug,
Right.
just had Spanish on the box, that's all.
That is exactly right. Yeah, and I mean, if you look at our generics, a lot of them are made in India, just so you know.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. Okay.
Can I ask you a question about your campaign?
Yes.
My background is in newspapers. I was the top music editor at the Seattle Times for years.
Really?
And your combination of brains and compassion seems to me not yet to have been marketed very well. That's from a newspaper guy.
Okay.
And I
Is my team listening?
well, I read a couple of notes to your campaign manager, but I didn't hear back. And I'm very concerned because one of the statistics that you cited is that 35% of the people who were asked don't know who you are. Isn't that right?
You know, that's what the New York Times poll said, right? Don't know enough. And yet, when we did a poll, we found that Dina Rossi had 98% name recognition, and I, before my general TV ads even went up, was at 78%, which I thought was pretty darn good.
That's very good.
And now it should be higher, partly thanks to Mr. Rossi, and partly thanks to my own advertising and media and everything else, and my doorbell, or you all. So, yeah, you're feeling like they don't know that I'm a compassionate
They don't know who you are.
person. Yeah.
But I've noticed in doorbelling that it's changed. I've been out maybe 3 or 4 months, 3 months, and more people know who you are now, but they don't have an image of you. And if I were your campaign manager, I would be sitting down very seriously and thinking about, I'm sorry, it's advertising, you know?
Yeah,
it's just
it
like,
is.
what's the image? And
Right.
I think, and one of the things that was going on a few weeks ago, when there was a terrible thing going on at the border with kids being put in cages, it seems like you need those photo ops to be there and say, hey, I'm a doctor and this is wrong.
Yeah.
And what you keep saying about your own, or you have told us about your own medical condition, it seems like you need a story that's not just by Jim Bruner in the Seattle Times, here's a little of this, here's a little of that. It's like you need a front page story that shows who you are.
Do you want to write it?
I would be happy to. Right, well, I can't, because I'm involved in this. I'm actually a freelancer now. I'm out of the paper.
Well,
but I can write an op-ed about how great you are, but I think you need a story, and I think you need to be more not devious, but more cunning. I think your campaign needs to be more cunning. That's just my opinion.
So, yeah, it's a really good question, and of course, I'm the pediatrician coming into this. I'm not in advertising or in running political campaigns. In the primaries, most of my ads were about me in the medical arena, and so I think people very much got the sense that they knew I was a doctor, but they didn't know anything else. And so now my ads are really talking about how I look at the world in a lot of ways, how I look at the middle class, how I look at education, how I look at our environment. So, with my team, we did a lot of just sitting down and them asking me questions and answering just conversationally, and so they'll probably take cuts of that and put it out there as ads, so that people can get a sense of who I am.
The ads help.
The ads help a lot.
But a story would be even better. A story that's just because you did something.
I wonder if the ad, people have to actually look. If you go on Facebook, you can see me in little video clips, like I was at the March to Keep Families Together, because that makes perfectly good sense for a pediatrician to be there. I did try to get to the border. They had a call out for doctors to come and help, to interview the kids, to help figure out what the medical needs were and socio-behavioral kind of needs. But there were so many pediatricians who tried, and I didn't want to pull a political card to do that because it was not really a political issue. It was a doctor issue. Otherwise, you could have it.
Can I just make a comment?
Yes.
I have to agree somewhat with that gentleman because in my canvassing that I've done, I hear a lot of, even today, negative Dino Rossi.
Yeah.
But you have such a great story, I think, and your positiveness to Dino's negative, ness, if that's a word,
Yeah.
I watched several YouTube ads, and I don't think they were from your campaign, so I haven't seen all your ads, but I would love to see more, I'm Kim Schrier, and, the anti-Dino thing, but that's kind of already there.
Yeah, I don't do any of that stuff.
Yeah, but,
Right.
just really knowing you, because you're such a positive candidate, and you have a great, and that's the story I tell when I go out there, is your story.
Well, here's the question. Do you, because, we have TV, like broadcast TV in the Seattle market. I don't know if we have got broadcast TV or if we're just on cable out here. Do you get my ads at all? Do you know, Callie?
I've not seen them.
Callie says, yes, we are out here on TV. Okay,
Oh, yeah.
you get them. You get something.
Oh, yeah,
We
definitely.
just, okay. Time for me to raise some more money so we can be more present. And
From
get
my
some TV
experience,
interviews,
And
maybe.
show who you are.
Definitely.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
95% of this community watches only Fox News. I don't know if that's true, but I worked at a nursing home for 3 months, for 3.5 years, and I swore I was new, I don't watch TV. I didn't know there was any other channel. That's all I ever saw.
Wow, it's like Teletubbies on a pediatric ward. I don't think they play that anymore, but that was what we found in all the exam rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
And
Okay,
I knew
Callie,
who
are
you were
doing-
because
Callie's my field director. So are you like taking mental notes and thinking about how we could address this, making sure my...
And what I would say is like the best way to push back against negatives is definitely like through face-to-face conversations, which is why like a huge chunk of our campaign is prioritizing that. And that's kind of like why when folks are like, don't know, Gino's run statewide 3 times, and that's the kind of the advantage he has. But we know the way to dispel that is that people who have like met Kim having face-to-face conversations, which is why like that's a big part of our outreach plan. Is like people are gonna know who Kim is when she talks to someone who knows her, and we know like every test shows it's the most effective way of persuading voters.
75% of the houses I contacted in 4 hours this morning were not home. I wish I'd had a flyer.
Yeah. Did we have flyers to leave at the doors? Not this
She
morning.
wasn't camping with our campaign.
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
So I didn't know who you were from, except I knew that you were one of the 2 Democrats that, in the primary. But I didn't have a lot of advice and, information, and then you started hearing the negative information. So I think we need that counteracted.
Can you get on Fox News?
You've refused care to children. Well, if you're in the medical community, you know that that's absolutely not so.
Right.
But.
And no pediatrician would, which is why the ads
No,
are very
no, of
effective,
course
because what pediatrician could possibly do that? She must be heartless, right?
And I'm not a professional like you are, but my feedback is just a volunteer precinct committee officers that when I've gone out, they don't want to vote for Dino, but it's kind of the thing, they get the ballot, no, I'm not voting for Dino, and who's Kim? Oh, well, I don't know, whatever, but if they have their name, which is, I kept putting it out there, well, Kim Schrier, and then when they had that in their mind,
Right.
I just don't want us to lose a lot of votes just because they don't want to vote for Dino. Does that make sense?
Yes, exactly.
But I don't know what you're all doing.
We want
I'm just
people to
trying
have
get
someone to
feedback
vote
help.
for, not just against. And so we are investing in all of you and in a robust mail campaign and TV and digital, and we are trying our best to get tendrils everywhere.
And folks, I think we have time for one more question, and then we have to wrap up.
I was actually, when I came in, so I came like half through the whole thing, and I heard you were talking about immigration. So the past year, I have been working with a national organization that focuses on immigration, and with the repeal of DACA and repeal of TPS, and basically everything's being repealed by the 45th administration. It's really important to me, and I think especially in this valley, that there is some certainty of like what is going on. I know that I also tried contacting Dave Riker, being the representative in this district. And yeah, I was not successful. The office here as well, Tyler's the secretary, who isn't someone who's open to talk to, or if you do, like, I don't think the information goes through. So I think it's important that we do have someone that will represent this community, since it's not at the focal point of, like, every, when we get there. I know that because of the government shutdowns that also happened, the Democratic Party held a lot of power in that moment. What could have held until there was a decision made on immigration, but the way that I viewed it was that there were other things of priority for them. So I think it's really important for me that electing somebody that will also have undocumented people as a priority, because they don't have somebody to represent them. So having that person, and then being open to the discussion of, like, their needs in our community. Because I think it's also, like, throughout the summer I've been seeing a lot of Border Patrol in the Valley, which is confusing to me because we're not near the border.
Not near the border.
Yeah. And it raises a lot of uncertainty.
Fear, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I've wanted to talk to local police department about how we can ensure safety of those who are undocumented. And so just being open to having those kinds of conversations.
I am absolutely open to those kinds of conversations. I think that, we are a nation of laws, and we also can enforce laws with common sense and compassion. I believe that a lot of what we're seeing here is just a product of a really broken immigration system, and that there have been opportunity after opportunity to come together and pass comprehensive immigration reform, and it hasn't happened. And I frankly blame both sides of the aisle. In terms of what's happening right now, boy, it's really hard to be in the minority. I don't believe the Democrats have any power really right now, and that's why it's so important to take back the House. But this doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. Like, we just need to come to the table, Democrats, Republicans, independents, everybody, and say, look, we need comprehensive immigration reform. We've got to secure our border. We need to have a discussion about whether a wall is really evidence-based the way to do that, and I believe it's not. We need to keep families together, because it is an American value to keep families together. And we need a reasonable path to citizenship. And you can have all those things in comprehensive immigration reform and have a compassionate system and a very sensible, logical system that protects and secures our borders. And that is what we'll do. And not to mention the clean DACA bill that we talked about, we just talked about. Because that, I believe, should be just a whole separate issue that should get passed right away. Because that's an easy one. It should be an easy one.
And I think seeing your emphasis on early childhood education is so important, because that gives, I taught at a high poverty school, and our kinders consistently came in knowing they had nothing going on at home. And that eliminates that good old boy system. Once you get to college, you're paying $100,000 a year for your education. That system leaves you for people like Kavanaugh.
Yeah, you're right.
Place to start.
You're right. And then, and also how can we expect things to change when our minimum wage is so low that in order to even put a roof over your head and put food on the table, then you've got parents working double shifts, and how can they possibly be home reading to their kids? And we all know that the best thing that you can do for a child's early education is read to them and talk with them. Like, TV can't do it, and if kids are sitting in front of the TV or they're taken care of by somebody who's not reading to them, then they're falling behind on a daily basis, and every day counts when you have a developing brain.
You get it.
I get it, because I'm a pediatrician and we need a new perspective. Yes, I get it. Yeah.
Along that line, I used to be a teacher. When I had my kids were little, I volunteered in the classroom a lot. I wasn't working, I was in the classroom a lot. Kindergarten, first grade. And then when my grandchildren here in town were in kindergarten and first grade, I again volunteered in the classroom. I will tell you, there's no comparison between the children in kindergarten and first grade in the early 1970s and the kids in kindergarten and first grade today. And I think a lot of it is because they're tired. I think moms and dads work, they get home, dinner's not ready, and I think it's poor nutrition as well. Too many McDonald's, too much French fries.
It goes back to poverty, it always does.
Well, and even so-called middle-class parents, you're just trying to get through the day. They can't think about what they want to teach their
It is very
kids.
different. It is very different. And back in the 70s, we had a very strong middle class, and we had a very strong middle class where in a lot of cases only one parent had to work. And so there was a parent who could volunteer in the classroom. And it was just, I can't help but to think that if we had a stronger middle class and we had higher wages, that we would have that same ability for parents to really devote themselves to supporting the education that happens in school.
Parents wouldn't send boys with September or October birthdays to school just because they don't want to pay another year's daycare. Even when all the studies and every teacher in the family will say, they'd be better off if you waited a year. Way better off.
I had a September boy, so I will not comment there.
Well, this is variable, but I know when I took my training, 50% of the students who failed first grade, and I think it was Wisconsin boys, in September and October.
Except you have to be 5.
Can I just say, I want to thank you for getting involved because we really have a chance now to do some good, and I'm so grateful that you stood up and did a lot
Yeah, and if folks haven't signed in already, there's a clip going around. If you sign in, that'd be great. Thanks so much for coming out.
I've seen it.
And I will stick around and answer questions, of course. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for knocking doors. I'm glad to hear you.
I'm sorry. Thanks so much, sir.
So, through,